Hey guys, it's been really cold here and today's been very windy. The sun finally came out, so me and Bandit are out on a little walk. And I wanted to talk a little bit about technology and its place in off-grid living or homesteading or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of people out there who, when they see that you have access to the internet and you're posting videos, will say, well, you're not living off grid. And I think there's a balance there, because off grid doesn't mean that you're not taking advantage of all the technologies that we have and all the technology that's taking place right now. And technology at its core is really advances in education and science and information sharing that separates us humans as a species from every other creature. And if we didn't have technology or the availability to share information and absorb information, then we would all still be living in caves and without a doubt would not have flourished as a species, or most of us absolutely would not even be alive on this earth. So I think there's definitely a place for technology, and we're at a turning point right now where access to technology, especially as it pertains to off-grid living, is really starting to become more and more accessible to more and more people. Part of that is because pricing has improved. I'm gonna walk across this snow bridge here. So the price of things has improved. Access and information sharing because of the internet has improved. So think of things like the people who want to be able to live off grid but need to still have access to internet. Now we can do that because of things like Starlink. If you have a cell phone signal, you can easily get internet that way, and it's become much more affordable. There's some plans that are $25 a month that give you unlimited, up to 50 megabytes download speed, which if used properly, you could work from home and make a living with just your cell phone. And that's relatively new. And certainly with Starlink internet, that opens up a whole new access to living in remote areas, which is really what I think off-grid living is all about. So parts of the world that were otherwise undeveloped and very difficult to live on, you can now get a Starlink internet satellite dish and a relatively small solar system, and you can have access to the internet. Another thing that opens up is emergency services. So let's say you don't have cell phone service in your area where you're trying to live, and you certainly don't have a landline phone. Now with Starlink internet, you have access, communication access, and I know there's some arguments that can be made that the whole reason of living off grid is to have less communications with the outside world, and I think that's relevant, but there are important features to being able to communicate with friends and family, but also communicate in the setting of being in distress. Whereas even 5-10 years ago, that was a very different problem. The other technological advance that I think is currently taking place that we're a part of and seeing is access to tax maps and access to live map data on things like Google Maps, and certain towns in my area have interactive tax maps where if you have cell phone service, you can pull up a map on your phone in live real time and drop a pinpoint, and it'll tell you whose parcel of land you're on or is abutting you, and easily get their contact information. This is helpful because now you can contact people and ask them about, land access, but also you can see if they're interested or willing to work with you on buying that parcel of land or cutting off a small chunk for you. A lot of people right now, properties and parcels that haven't changed hands or left the family in hundreds of years, are starting to go up for sale. And if you can be the first person to ask them before they've made that final decision, and before it gets a ton of popularity on websites and bidding wars and that sort of thing, you can really have a good chance at getting it. And so what I'm talking about is some of these parcels of land, let's say 100 acres plus, that have just been in the same family or the same ownership for generations. No one's done anything with. They've been holding on to them, saying, well, this is the family land. One day we'll build a homestead on there, or build a house. Right now, with inflation and also aging populations, I'm seeing some of these properties that you thought would never be sold, properties that in your childhood you always thought, that would be really nice to have a part of that for myself, are just getting sold and listed for sale for incredible amounts of money. And that's something you can't really predict as far as when will something like that come up for sale. So if you can access the tax maps and basically find the information for the owners, contact them directly and say, hey, I realize you have 100 acres, there's no properties on it. I'm not looking for 100 acres, but I'd like 5 or 10 acres, and I was wondering if maybe you were thinking about subdividing off a piece for me. That's a very real possibility right now, and I don't know if we've seen that sort of thing before. So that's another example of technology and how it can be very beneficial and utilized properly by an off-grid or a homesteader. I'm going to turn around. It's about as far as I'm going to walk on this trail, but it's a very pretty area that me and Bandit like to go on walks. There's Bandit. So between more easily having access to solar energy in general, internet, and then land ownership maps and tax maps, and for that matter, just straight up Google Earth. Google Earth has been around for a while, but it is such an amazing asset to have, to be able to look at topography and figure out what the land looks like, even public land. But you can see the different areas and Before, you would have to get a real map, sit down and look at it, which of course everyone should have the ability to read a map. And land ownership wise, you used to have to go into town hall in person, ask about a parcel of land, pull the file on it, get the information for the landowner, write them a letter, give them a call, something like that. Now we can, in a lot of jurisdictions, access that information from a computer or your phone. And I know that some people would say that's not great, and I don't think all of that information should be as easily accessible as it is right now. And probably we'll see that in the next 5 years there starts to be a paywall or a lock screen that keeps everyone from being able to access that information so easily. But as long as it's available, you need to take advantage of it. So I think that's another great thing. You don't have to go into town hall. You don't have to, or in person, so you can do this from across the country. If you figure out, hey, I want to try to homestead or buy a piece of land in Colorado, you can start doing your research, looking at tax maps, who owns what, that sort of thing. And if you really want to get deep into the weeds, you can see who owns what, you can look them up, you can see relatively how old they are, young they are, when they purchased that property. That can all give you clues on how likely that person may be to want to sell that property. If they just bought it a year ago, they're probably not looking to offload it. And if they are, it's probably going to be for well above what they paid for it. Whereas some of these properties that have been in people's families for generations, there's really not a lot of cash value associated with those. And sometimes they just want to get rid of it or see it go to a good cause. So that's something that everyone interested in an off-grid lifestyle or buying property for that matter in good faith should be looking into. The purpose of this talk about landowners is not to find a cheap piece of land to get a good deal on and turn around and sell for a profit. So that can also be done, but I'm talking about finding a piece of land that is perfectly able to sustain a homestead and turn it into what you want, build it the way you want to build it, and start to get people living in parts of towns and cities and states and the country that otherwise were not accessible. Part of inflation is house prices, and the price of home ownership and rentals has gone up 20% per year in some places in the last 5 years, and people just can't afford to live. How can you, if your entire paycheck is going to your 2-bedroom apartment, how can you afford to live? And we don't know what the repercussions of that is going to look like until 20 years from now, when no one owns real estate. You don't own your own house when you're retirement age. You don't have any retirement savings. You don't have any retirement funding or backup for medical bills and that sort of thing. That is what bankrupts our country. If we're not bankrupt already, you can argue, when the general population is essentially all poor with no assets, that is when bad things start to happen revolutions, revolts, just poverty, widespread poverty. And that's exactly what I think off-grid living is all about, is trying to live a little bit more sustainable and resourceful life, taking matters into your own hands. And you still need to make some money, but you don't need to make $3,000 a month to pay for your small apartment that you don't have any assets in anyways. If your landlord decides you're gone, they sell your property, or they sell the property you live in, and you're out on the streets. And by then, who knows if you'll be able to afford the new price of rent. So it's really sad to see that happen. You see it happen. It's in the news all the time around where I am, where let's say an apartment complex, an old apartment complex, multi-unit house or something like that, is sold to an investment company in Boston, and they come up and say, we're gonna redo all the units, everyone has to vacate in 3 months, you can come back when we're done refurbishing the apartments, but your rent's gonna go from $1,500 a month to $3,500 a month if you want to come back, because that's the market. And when we have a nice fancy apartment building, people will pay that, and that's the market price. And we're seeing people get basically kicked out on the streets, and that's right now. We haven't seen the repercussions of that in 20 years. These people that haven't been able to save a dime, just scraping by, they're not investing in any sort of retirement account or assets that can be sold. They're just living in an apartment. It's bad news. And that, I think, is why, one of the big reasons why people are getting more and more interested in living off-grid and more sustainable lives. So I think that's a big reason why I've been interested in it for so long. I'm a very self-sufficient person to begin with, and I kind of want to take it to the next level and give myself a challenge. So it's gonna be a while for me to get my property up and running, but I hope to share my thoughts, but also my progress on my cabin in the future, over the next few months at least. If you haven't seen my other videos on my cabin, please check them out, subscribe, and like the videos. That helps a lot. I'm trying to improve every video, and it's hard because my cabin I don't go to every single day. Right now I'm kind of staying away because of the weather. It's not worth heading out there and being freezing cold and working a few hours and not getting any real projects started or finished. So I go out there just to hang out right now, but when the weather starts to improve, the road gets a little bit better, probably after mud season, so March or April, I'm gonna start some bigger projects that I'll document: windows, roof, some siding improvements. I need to figure out a water system, electrical system, solar system, outhouse, driveway, road grading, build some sort of lean-to shelter, garage. So that'll all be coming this summer, and hopefully with enough likes and subscribes and video shares and that sort of thing, we'll also be at the point where we're making a few dollars off some of the videos. I don't have huge plans because I don't think I'm really fantastic YouTube personality, but I am trying and enjoying making the videos and documenting my progress and improving. Hopefully every time. It's kind of uncharted territory for me, making videos and sharing my life, and some of the technology with filming and uploading and dubbing of sounds and videos and soundtracks is new to me, but I love learning new things, so I am enjoying it a lot. So hopefully you guys can follow along and help me out that way. If you have any ideas or comments or topics that you want me to discuss or talk about before I really get deep into finishing my cabin, let me know. Be happy to talk about them, give you a shout out. So for now, Bandit and I are gonna get inside, get warm, and figure out what to do for the rest of this week.